glad to have Dakota with us tonight, and he'll tell you all about his experience. It's pretty vast, what all he's done, and so on. And so we appreciate you taking the time and coming. And we're a pretty good network here, actually. We feel really good about networking out to everybody there and talking about it at our other monthly meeting at our committee and so on. So, and we're glad you're here to share with us. Just give Dakota a big hand. Second
I'm kind of a stickler for trying to stay to the timeline, so I'll stay here as long as you all want to stay here. But when it's time to go, somebody can get the high sign. I'm from Claremore, Oklahoma, Rogers County. I graduated from Sequoia High School, just on the north side of that, in 1981. My family moved into northeastern Oklahoma in the late 70s. My wife's family had been here since the early 70s, and so this is where our roots are at. My wife and I have been married about 21 years. We've got 3 kids, girl, boy, girl, 17, 14, and 12. And I have pictures there on the flyer. When I graduated from high school, I took a commission, or I'm sorry, I was appointed to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. They let me out after 4 years. I took my commission in the Marine Corps, and I served 20 years as a U.S. Marine, retiring in 2005 as a senior lieutenant colonel. Over that 24-year period, full-time I was in uniform. I probably had 17 different addresses, I've been to 30-some-odd countries, all kinds of operations, and I was very dedicated on making sure that I kept my roots here in Oklahoma, maintained Oklahoma residency that entire time. Voted absentee ballot, paid my taxes here. I mean, this is where family is, and it's where my heart was, and it's where I brought my values from. So this is home. When I got to the latter part of my career, the last several years, I was involved in a lot of analytic work, in addition to operational experience globally, where I supported senior leadership in the Defense Department, the Pentagon in particular, found on the Marine Corps, senior generals in the Marine Corps to begin with, and then moved on to a small shop, kind of a think tank group supporting the Secretary of Defense, and we did some wide-ranging and very in-depth studies. I brought a detailed biography with me in the back, and so I appreciate if you all would grab a copy of that, or if it's of interest to you. I just find it difficult to get through 30 years of experience in about 2 minutes, but it's taken me all over the place. So when I was finishing up my Marine Corps career, I had established a fairly robust network of relationships and certainly a reputation within the service, in particular, and across the other services. So on retirement, I was hired in by a company called Systems Planning Analysis Incorporated. They had a large contract to support the Department of Homeland Security, and myself and a colleague joined another fellow from Los Alamos, who's a nuclear weapons designer, and we stood up a biosurveillance program for the nation to provide our national leadership here with warning of any kind of a bio event that may be occurring, either here in the U.S. or globally. The idea is the sooner you can respond to a threat like that, whether it's naturally occurring, a mad cow disease or bird flu, or man-directed, like the anthrax attacks that occurred, you can lessen the consequences both in severity and duration. So that's what we were all about. After we got that operational, I was brought into another organization I spent 5 years at. Again, we supported the Secretary of Defense, provided expert testimony to Congress, national intelligence community, federal law enforcement, and certainly some international organizations where I work routinely with the Israelis, the Australians, the Brits, and several other countries around the world to try to better understand how the world changes, what the trends are, whether they're technological or demographic, ideological, cultural, religious, you name it, where are there competitions for resources, both in terms of actual materials, or a diplomatic contest, etc. And then what are the implications to the United States? So you're trying to understand all of that so that we can make the best informed decisions possible for our country. And as we think 15, 20, 25 years down the road, and make sure our country is as strong and as viable and as resilient as it possibly can in this very dynamic global environment. So the last 30 years of my life since leaving Sequoia have been focused on serving the country that I love, serving the state and community that I love, and doing everything I could in service. You don't get rich doing that, you do it because you love it, and you want to be a part of something larger than yourself, and do the best you can to preserve our home. My oath of office has been mentioned before about the Constitution. To support and defend the Constitution of the United States against foreign and domestic. Right? That's the first part of that. And that's what I dedicated myself to. So it wasn't a party, Loyalty, as I was in uniform, it wasn't loyalty to whoever was in the White House. It's to make sure that I was serving the country and our families and all the things that we hold dear. So that's just a real quick run through. We can get into any kind of detail that you want to. I will answer any question you have about me, my personal experience, where I've been, what I've done, what I believe in. And what I enjoy most is the Q&A part, because I don't know what might be on your heart or mind or what's most important to you, and I'd certainly like to answer your questions about that. Tom, does that kind of run the gamut?
Yeah. Well, I got a question. Who is the first friend you'd like to make up there in Congress?
The first friend?
First friend you'd like to pick out. I mean, we all got guys that are people, women and men that we might.
Yeah.
Can you think about one that you'd like to go and
No,
be friends with?
I'm not up there to make friends.
Well, I know that.
Represent the district.
I know.
The thing is,
You have to say hi to somebody.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah.
I had a few tours in and out of the Pentagon. First tour, later back-to-back, 99 and 2001, and 2001 and 2003. So I was at the Pentagon, stationed there, 9/11. I was deployed down to U.S. Central Command to help engineer the response back to try to get Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Came back, continued some focus on China, and then was deployed again to support the U.S. Marine Corps effort in Kuwait. We did the invasion of Iraq, unseated Saddam Hussein. The reason I bring that up is during that period of time, and the jobs that I had subsequent to that, I had already established a network. So going back, it's really paying, visits to and reestablishing connections. The Undersecretary of the Navy is a good friend of mine. The Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Intelligence issues is a good friend of mine. I've worked with professional staffers on various armed services committees, Congressional Research Service, Government Accountability Office. I have friends in the intelligence community that I can't really get into. But there's just a wide-ranging group of people that I'm already good friends
So
with.
you've got a ready-made social network.
That's the thing.
Network, maybe not social network, but a working network.
Yeah, it's a professional network. The Deputy Commissioner for the U.S. Coast Guard for Public Affairs is a good friend of mine as well. So I guess part of this this point that I'm making is that 30 years of experience and the relationships that I've developed at the national level and how those extend into colleagues of mine in the English-speaking countries in particular, and in Israel, is what I'm trying to bring to bear. Most freshmen that go up to Congress, it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to figure out what's going on. It's that convoluted, the bureaucracy is that deep and entrenched, and when you're talking about pushing through legislation or stopping bad legislation, who are the power brokers? How do you get things done? It takes a while to figure that out. So I'm going in with that experience already behind me, and be most effective day one of office. So that's another aspect of my service to this district that I would like to bring before you. Sir.
Dakota, considering your experience in the military and considering some of the things that the present administration has done, either legislation or things like executive order, I know there's probably some things that you don't agree with, and I don't want to pick anything, I just prefer that you pick things, that you would like to see change that have been done in the last 3 years. What would be some of those things, and along with, avoiding or ignoring the Constitution, something. Can you just pick a few that you would like to see changed or reversed? Or,
I'll give you an example. I mean, the tax code needs to be replaced. I think it's gotten to the point where you can't reform it, you can't modify it. It's got something like 150 specified exceptions for various groups that just proliferate into the complexity of the tax code. Depending on who you talk to and who's in front of you, they'll say it's 70,000 or 80,000 pages long. It's not totally enough, but it just goes on and on and on. The tax code breeds the type of corruption that we've seen in Washington, where if you've got a special interest group and you want to get a lobbyist, because he's the guy who's going to stand in the door and establish relationships with folks, what the lobbyists normally try to do is to get an exception for the group in some kind of favorable tax treatment. So if you got rid of the existing tax code, and I'm a fair tax advocate, I knew that's where you're going. Some folks like a flat tax. I'm a fair tax guy. I believe that whether you're a corporation or an individual, if you retain the money and you get to determine how you want to spend it, or put it in a gunny sack, or bury it with your chickens, I mean, whatever you want to do, that's the choice of the individual. And so on the fair tax is a consumption tax. When you spend $1, then there's a prorated aspect of that that goes back to the federal government. So that would be one example.
And from the fair tax standpoint, or should say consumption tax, which I kind of agree, I prefer 100% participation from everybody. And do you?
Well, the bill that's been debated on the bill already has what they call a rebate or something like that. So those are at the very end or bottom of the spectrum. The current tax code would give various advantages where you have to make a certain amount of money before it's even taxed. So I think what's happened is they tried to include part of that in the fair tax proposal so that those, again, that are at the very bottom of the economic spectrum are protected from taxes. I agree with the idea that everybody needs to contribute, to the running of the country in some way. So if all you can afford is a hamburger, the tax on that hamburger is going to be small. If I can afford a mega yacht, then the tax associated with that is going to be correspondingly larger. So I would like to maximize participation. I think it's getting into the details as to where is that in the curve, and if you've got somebody who's just nearly destitute, how do we account for it?
Well, along as you mentioned
I'll actually answer your question when we get there.
the people who, lobbyists refer to, if you start making exceptions to rules, then that makes not logical step. The lobbyists will come in and start making more exceptions as time goes on, if you don't say, one like very simple, 100% by everybody.
Yeah, it is. But again, if you went that route with a fair tax route, whether you had an exception in there or not, it would be built into a certain economic strata. Now, as you're saying, if the cutoff is 15,000 a year, why not 15,500 the next year?
20,000.
20,000 or 25,000. So, and that's the danger with the fair tax, with the flat tax. You start off with whether it's 999 or 7.5 across the board, or whatever. You can always kind of incrementally increase that. So I certainly appreciate what you're getting at.
Yeah, as you said in your previous talk, you discussed your previous oath of office defending against threats abroad and at home. What do you consider our biggest threats abroad and at home?
You can classify them as near term and long term on that. I know I didn't get to answer your question, though. Let's not forget about that. The near term threat is a radicalized nuclear armed Iran. And I view threats in maybe a different way. What threatens the viability of our country? What is an existential threat or something that causes us grievous harm? You could view drug gangs inside the United States as certainly a threat. Does it mean the end of our country? No, it's a law enforcement matter, so we deal with that. But a nuclear armed Iran, for a lot of reasons we can go into if you'd like to, is an incredibly destabilizing force and poses an existential threat to Israel, and certainly would spur nuclear proliferation in the Middle East. So that's a short-term issue. Long-term, you're talking about a very robust, muscular China. Okay? If you've got 1 billion+ people and you've got the resources either in your borders or contiguous to them, you can put together some pretty powerful capabilities. And it's not just a military contest. I don't want anybody to think that all I'm about is guns and planes and tanks and all of that. We're talking economic competition. But just like Roosevelt said, talk softly and carry a big stick, right? The larger population you have, the more economic import you have in the global scene, the more influence you have. So if we're not in that region, they certainly dominate the landscape influentially with Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Japan, the Koreas. I mean, it just goes on and on. So long term.